Hi everyone. So I'm very happy to be here. As it has been said, I'm a French and Canadian entrepreneur. I've been in the crypto ecosystem for a few years now, for 7 years. I founded a startup back then in 2015, which was a consultancy cabinet, so giving advisory and technical consultancy mainly for big financial institutions. The Bank of France has been quoted, but also major banks in France and in Europe. We also had a subsidiary in Geneva in Switzerland. So since last year, we've been acquired by KPMG. So now I'm director of blockchain and crypto assets at KPMG France, but also, of course, involved on those topics on a wider area than just France, but also in Europe and in the world. I've also been very involved in the construction of the French and European ecosystem. I founded the French Association for French Professionals around crypto assets also in 2016. And then the ADAN, which exists also now in France in 2020. So I've been quite involved in all the debates around regulation, tax, accounting norms, and so on. So if there are any questions about that, I can also answer them. So today I will be talking about the crypto asset from a macro perspective and how is it an opportunity for Europe. Also drawing a parallel between the emergence of the internet just a few decades ago. So my first slide will be on the figures, but some of them have already been said by previous speakers. But just to give you my own perspective on that, is that the crypto market, and especially Bitcoin, has gone from a niche market to an obvious market in less than 10 years. So despite all the crash of the last few weeks, Bitcoin is still in the top 20 most valuable assets in the world, and the crypto capitalization is around $1 trillion from a worldwide perspective, so which is quite big. The adoption has already also been said by the previous speakers, so 300 million people about in the world, which is also a lot. And from a European perspective, so as I'm coming from France, I'm talking about the French market, which is 8% of the people in France own crypto. And this is quite interesting because there are actually more people in France who hold crypto than people who own stocks. So this is not a niche market anymore. Most people are looking into it. Probably at the end of the year, this 8% will turn into 10 or 12%. And of course, all the countries around us, in Europe especially, and there was a recent study by the ECB, shows that, for example, in the Netherlands, it's already 14–15% of the people who own crypto. So it's not a niche market anymore. The other aspect of crypto that's often downsided, even though it's quite big, is the payment aspect. Most people see crypto as just an asset class, even though it's also a payment system that's actually working quite a bit. So I'm giving you a bit some figures. First one is that the two main crypto, which are Bitcoin and Ether, handle 1.5 million transactions per day, which is twice as much as FedWire, so the official, let's say, transaction method in the US. And if you look at Bitcoin alone, you already have $13,000 million that have been settled on the Bitcoin network in 2021, which is more than Visa. So once again, all these figures just to give you a perspective on where the market is headed and what it is now, which is my conviction is that it's now an obvious market, not a niche market anymore. The perspective that I'm going to take for the next few minutes is this one, which is that crypto is a layer that was missing to the web, and that's going to bring us into what we call Web 3. So the first layer of the web, which was Web 1, was just a read-online web. So basically, you have a website, you read information, and you go away. This is very important, of course, but it's very limited. The second layer of the web, which is Web 2, is the one that we are in now, which is the social web, or the Web 2, which adds the ability to write, to contribute. So we are all on social networks, we contribute, we post content, and of course this is very important, especially for the media, for the post office, for any telecommunication company, because anyone now has the ability to just post content, choose where they want to get their information from, so it's very, very important. And the Web3 adds the ability to own, which was not possible in Web 2. Something that people don't actually realize, so I'm trying to underline this, is that when you're talking about Web 2, anything you own in the digital world, you don't own it. You don't own it, because it's someone else who owns it for you. The difference between having, I don't know, physical cash at home that you own and money on your bank account is that the money on your bank account is not an asset. It's a promise from the bank that they are going to give you, at some point in time, this money. But if the bank fails, if they don't want to give you your money back, if you don't access the bank anymore, if you don't have the internet, I don't know, you don't have this money. So anything you own in the digital world, from the nature itself of the digital world, is not an asset. It's something, it's a liability. It's something that someone holds for you. What Bitcoin brings is this fundamental change, is that now you are able to own. So before Bitcoin, anything you have in the digital world is a liability, and after Bitcoin, you have the ability to have an asset. So this is, of course, very transformational, because it means that you can own things, you can go away from your bank, but also companies can go away from their banks. Just making a little parenthesis here, as KPMG, we are currently advising major French corporations, so from the top 40 corporations. They are owning their own assets. And that means that they are telling their banks, I want my money back, to quote a famous sentence, which means that some 5, 10, 15%, probably 20% of the money in the next few years from some companies is going to be taken away from banks. And that's a huge problem for financial institutions, because now this money, they are handling it at a company level. So the company itself is managing the money without any trusted third party from the financial world. So this is the transformational part from the Web3 that I want to show. Now, once I've said this, let's go back to reality. Reality is that Web3 makes the same promises that the Web 1 was making 30 years ago, which was already at that time, everyone is going to be free, everyone is going to, do their own thing, you can be without any trusted third party, and so on and so on. Now, the real question 30 years after is, who in this room has an SMTP server and sends their own mail? There is one. There is two. Right, nearly nobody. So with that in mind, you could say that the internet has failed its promises, because the promise of the internet was that you could have decentralization at its best. And 30 years later, it has never been so centralized. Because if you take the combo with the GAFAM, so Google, Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, and NSA, well, it's centralized, basically. Everything's centralized, and you don't have the choice. So now, with that in mind, also we can apply that reasoning to crypto. Most people will not jump into cypherpunk philosophy because they like it. Most people would just change service provider, because most people don't need the promise. And that hurts me to say, because I would like them to go into that promise. But the problem is that most people don't need it. If you are a European and you have a bank account and everything is going well and your currency is strong, there is no need for you to hold Bitcoin. You can hold it as an asset class. You can expose yourself to this asset class because you want to invest. But as a payment method, in nearly all cases, it makes no sense. Except if you're doing international payments and so on and so on. Of course, we can discuss that. But most people will just change service provider. A proof of that, Coinbase has 100 million clients. They've just changed provider. They are not holding crypto assets at their bank. They're holding crypto assets at Coinbase. You've just changed provider. So now, with that in mind, how is cryptocurrency an opportunity for Europe, and what are we doing it with this opportunity? Well, let's go back also to the internet. How have the USA responded to the internet, and well, I'm taking the example of France because I'm coming from there. Well, the US have basically made Amazon, and then they've made Google, and then they've made Facebook, and so on and so on. In France, in 1994, there was a famous report that was delivered to the French government, which had the mission to assess the opportunity of the internet. And this report, I'm just giving you some quotes. So the turnover of the internet services doesn't even amount to 1/12 of that of the Minitel, which was the French alternative, centralized alternative to the Minitel, to the internet. Second quote, the internet is not appropriate for commercial services. No, it's not at all. You can't do anything commercial on the internet, really. No, forget it. Third quote, the internet will never be capable of handling voice or image. Never. You can't do anything with voice or image on the internet. Come on. So, of course, when you go back in time and you look at what's going on now, most critiques of cryptocurrency, for example, is it will never scale. It will never scale. It's not able to handle transaction. It's not appropriate for payment. Come on. And so on and so on and so on. So we have not learned the lesson. The main topic of discussion in Europe currently is how much we should prevent people from using crypto. And I'll be happy to discuss that in a panel this afternoon, of course, around regulation in Europe. Now, when we are doing that, what's at stake? Well, a lot of things are at stake, because when you look at crypto, you can be induced to think that it's only economic, it's only financial, and it will not affect your daily life. But that's not what I think. I think it's very important for all these different aspects: independence, sovereignty, liberty, and so on and so on. And same, I'm going to make a parallel with the internet and show you that has a lot of importance. Oh, sorry. The situation now for a European that wants to challenge Google, if you want to compete with Google, you will have to do it on the Play Store and communicate on YouTube. That's the current situation if you're a European entrepreneur. So, of course, it means that the economic hegemony from a few number of corporations, especially if they are not in Europe, is detrimental. It's very bad, because if you want competition, if you want sovereignty, if you want to have big companies, well, now it's too late. Europe has been trying to make new search engines, for example, for quite a bit of years, but at some point it's too late. You can't compete on Google when what you have to do to compete with Google is use their services. So that's the situation now. Another example, and more cultural example, let's say. Of course, I'm coming from France, so I have to show that. This in Europe is art. In the US, it's nudity. So this is censored on the internet. This is just a plain, direct consequence of the US hegemony in the internet world. So if you go on Twitter, if you go on Facebook, if you go on whatever, you can do hate speech. The debate is current and heating, so I'm not going to go too deep into that. But a few years ago, you could publish a video from a terrorist organization, there was no problem. But if you publish, a chest, that's a problem, really. You have to censor that, you have to take it away. If the social networks were French, maybe you would have another point of view on that. So this is just a consequence. The freedom of speech notion is very different in Europe and in the USA, and it's very, very good that it's different. Every nation does what they want. But the American vision prevails on the internet, so it prevails everywhere, because we all use the same internet. So from just a communication method, which was the internet, that we thought could not handle voice and image and will not scale and cannot handle any commercial services, we're at a point where 30 years later, if you want to compete with anything, you have to use their services, and the cultural values are being imported into Europe. And of course, with values goes law, rights, and so on and so on. So, conclusion of that is that our cultural values, our sovereignty, our economic strength is challenged and is now challenged by the internet, because we were incapable of vision then. And now we have to not make the same mistake, if possible, for the next few years. So in a future where everything of value is transferred in crypto, because as I said, Web3 is the ownership layer of the internet, so if you want to transfer anything of value, you will at some point use crypto. Well, maybe fostering the early ecosystem is not only an economic matter, because it will have political, cultural, sovereignty, etc., consequences. Now, focusing on regulation, as we've done in the past, and as we consider Europe most of the time as just a big market, it will just transform Europe into a playing ground for foreign subsidiaries, which is nice for a consumer, which is not nice for citizens. And the problem is that we often think about Europe as a market for consumers and not as a political entity with citizens that want to exert sovereignty and power. So, with that in mind, this is my conclusion. We need, as Europeans, to go into this crypto space because it's full of opportunity. The fact that the promise of decentralization is the same that the promise that internet made a few years ago should not prevent us from thinking that most people are going to be pragmatic. They will not be willing to go into the cypherpunk philosophy. They will use services. They will use custodian. Company will use custodians, etc., etc. And so we need to provide those companies with solutions from Europe, because otherwise the risk that we're taking is to replay the internet, let's say, joke that happened in Europe. I think I still have 3 minutes, so maybe I will take the opportunity of some questions. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. Are there any questions? Yes?
Thank you very much for this presentation. My question is, how do you see the CBDCs?
Oh, I could repeat the question, but yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much once more. My question is, how do you see the collision with the CBDCs when they'll enter the market? Because the French governor said at Davos a couple of weeks ago that, let's say, in 3 years we're going to have them. Thank you.
It's a very important question, but my answer on that is going to be an opinion, but it's going to be quite radical. I think CBDC is a false topic. It will not exist. For the moment, it's still just a Christmas list. Let me explain myself. The only time where we started to mention CBDC was when Facebook announced Libra. Before that, it was not a topic. For one reason, which is that currency is already digital. When you're making a wire transfer, you're not transferring anything physical. And most of the currency already existing is digital. So why would you need a digital currency when digital currency is already digital? So there's the central bank. But most likely, the reason why we started to talk about CBDC was because central banks were feeling threatened by the fact that there was a private company issuing their own currency. So they had to react. And they said, OK, we're going to make a CBDC. We are 3 years after the announcement of Libra. Well, the Libra project itself is dead for different technical reasons. We still have even no starting point of how it would work technically. There is a working group at the ECB that will deliver a conclusion in 2025, if I remember well. But the problem is that, let's go back to what I said about asset and liability. If you want to make an asset in the digital world, the only way we have found for now is through proof of work, well, proof of stake, whatever, cryptocurrency. And you need to incentivize people to come to crypto to have something that's not biased. Because if you can create money out of thin air, then your crypto reward, you will not come with your machines and computing power if you can lose everything just because someone decides. So one first reason why I think it's a false topic is because there is no technical way to do it without taking away the central bank, which I think from a central bank perspective will not happen. The second reason is that it's in the interest of no one. The commercial banks will not be willing to be disrupted. So all the commercial banks I've talked to, for the moment, they are following the topic from far because they know that it's a working group. They will have some conclusions in a few years. But they all know that if it accelerates, you're going to have all the lobbyists are going to go and say, we don't want that. They don't want to be disrupted. The central bank doesn't want that. Because the central bank job is not to handle the bank accounts of 500 million people. They don't know how to do that. The central bank's mission is to handle inflation, which is already a big mission, as we can see currently. So they don't know how to do that. They probably don't want to do that. And the third kind of person that doesn't want that is the citizen. I don't want to be spied on every time I make a transaction by the central bank. So for all these reasons, I think it's a false topic. It's just a communication, let's say, defense from the central banks against private currencies and cryptocurrencies. But I know that it's an opinion. It's open to debate, of course. Thank you, everyone. And I'm being told that time is out. Thank you.